The first gunshot had barely faded into the horizon when Faith Zimmerman abandoned her trust in God. Dust settled on the church steps where she sat alone, her Bible closed beside her, its gilt-edged pages untouched for weeks. The sun bore down mercilessly on Willow Creek, Texas, a town that had once seemed promising when she'd arrived with dreams as vast as the prairie sky. Now in the summer of 1876, those dreams lay buried alongside her father, mother, and baby brother, all victims of a fever that had swept through town like wildfire, claiming nearly a quarter of its population. Faith twisted the simple gold band on her finger, her mother's wedding ring, the only piece of her family she had left. At 22, she found herself utterly alone in a town where she knew few people beyond those who attended Sunday service. Even Pastor Miller's words of comfort had started to sound hollow after the third funeral in as many weeks. Most folks don't sit outside a church looking that miserable unless they're contemplating something drastic. The voice startled her. Faith looked up, squinting against the sun to see a tall silhouette looming above her. As her eyes adjusted, the figure came into focus, a man with trail dust coating his clothes and a worn Stetson pulled low over his eyes. He wasn't local. She would have remembered him. "I'm not contemplating anything," Faith replied, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Just sitting." The man gestured to the Bible beside her. "That book usually gets opened when someone's looking for answers." "I've stopped looking." Faith ran her finger along the leather cover, tracing the embossed cross. "God's stopped answering." The stranger surprised her by sitting down beside her on the church steps, his spurs jangling as he settled. He smelled of leather, horses, and the open trail. "Faith comes back slow," he said softly, "like a skittish horse after it's been spooked." Faith turned to study him properly. He was older than her, but not by many years, perhaps 28 or 29. His face was weathered from the sun, but his eyes were kind, crinkling at the corners when he glanced at her. A small scar crossed his right eyebrow. "You sound like you know something about it," she said. He nodded, removing his hat and setting it beside him. His hair was dark brown, almost black, with strands of dust catching the sunlight. "Name's Adam Lawson," he said, extending a calloused hand. "I've had my share of arguments with the Almighty." Faith hesitated before taking his hand. "Faith Zimmerman." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Faith, fitting name for someone sitting on church steps. "It doesn't feel fitting anymore." She withdrew her hand. "What brings you to Willow Creek, Mr. Lawson? We don't get many strangers passing through." "Call me Adam." He settled more comfortably against the steps. "I'm delivering horses to the new cavalry outpost south of here. Thought I'd stop for supplies before heading on." Faith nodded, looking out at the town's single dusty street. Willow Creek was barely more than a wide spot in the road, a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, the church, and a scattering of houses. Not much to hold anyone's interest. "You picked a poor time to visit," she said. "We've had a fever sweep through. Lost a lot of folks." Adam's expression sobered. "I'm sorry to hear that. We buried the last victim yesterday." Faith swallowed hard. "My brother. He was only 10. Adam was quiet for a long moment. "That's why you're out here with your Bible closed." It wasn't a question, but Faith nodded anyway. "They say God never gives us more than we can bear." "They're wrong." "Maybe it's not about what we can bear," Adam said quietly. "Maybe it's about who helps us bear it." Before Faith could respond, the church door opened behind them, and Pastor Miller stepped out, his face brightening when he saw Faith. "Miss Zimmerman, I was hoping you'd come by today." The elderly pastor's gaze shifted to Adam. "And you've brought a friend." "Just passing through, sir," Adam said, rising to his feet and extending his hand. "Adam Lawson, Pastor David Miller. Always pleased to meet a fellow traveler." The pastor's kind eyes returned to Faith. "How are you holding up, my dear?" Faith forced a smile. "I'm managing, Pastor." The lie came easily, practiced over weeks of well-meaning inquiries. In truth, she didn't know how she would continue. The small house her family had built at the edge of town now echoed with ghosts. Her father's woodshop sat empty, tools gathering dust. Her mother's garden was withering without attention. Even her teaching position at the small schoolhouse had been temporarily filled by the mayor's wife while Faith grieved. "I was wondering if you'd reconsider my offer," Pastor Miller said gently. "Mrs. Jenkins has that spare room, and she'd welcome the company." Faith shook her head. "Thank you, but I need to look after the house. It's all I have left of them." The pastor sighed but didn't press. "Well, you know where to find me if you change your mind. Service is at 10 on Sunday." He nodded to Adam. "Mr. Lawson, you're welcome to join us if you're still in town." "Appreciate the invitation," Adam replied. After the pastor retreated inside, Faith stood abruptly. "I should go. There's work waiting at home." Adam rose as well, placing his hat back on his head. "Mind if I walk with you? I've been in the saddle 3 days straight. Could use the stretch." Faith hesitated, aware of how it might look to the gossips in town, a young widow walking with a strange man. Then again, she wasn't sure she cared anymore what people thought. "Suit yourself," she said, picking up her Bible. They walked in silence down the main street. Faith nodded politely to Mrs. Thompson sweeping the boardwalk in front of the general store and to Mr. Peterson smoking his pipe outside the barber shop. Their eyes lingered curiously on Adam. "You're causing quite a stir," Faith murmured. "Willow Creek doesn't see many new faces." "Small towns have long memories and sharp eyes," Adam replied, tipping his hat to an elderly woman who was watching them intently from her porch. "Been that way everywhere I've traveled." "And where exactly have you traveled, Mr. Lawson?" Faith found herself curious despite her grief. "All over. Started in Pennsylvania, worked my way west after the war. Drove cattle in Kansas, broke horses in Colorado." He glanced at her. "Never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots." "By choice," Adam shrugged. "At first. Then it became a habit." They reached the edge of town where the road forked. One way led toward the larger farms and ranches, the other to a cluster of smaller homesteads. "We're down this way," Faith said, gesturing to the smaller path. "We?" Adam questioned. Faith caught herself. "I meant, I'm down this way." Adam didn't comment on her slip, for which she was grateful. They continued walking, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows before them. Faith's small house came into view, a modest wooden structure with a sagging front porch and a neglected garden plot to one side. "It's not much," Faith said defensively. "Looks like a proper home to me," Adam replied. "I've spent most nights these past years under the stars or in boarding houses." Faith paused at her gate, suddenly uncertain. Social propriety dictated she should thank him for the escort and bid him goodbye. But the thought of entering the empty house, with its silent rooms and memories, made her stomach clench. "Would you like some water before you head back to town?" she asked impulsively. "The well water here is sweet." Adam smiled. "That's kind of you. A drink would be welcome." Faith led him around to the back of the house where a covered well stood. She drew up a bucket of cool water and offered him the dipper. Adam drank deeply, water dripping down his chin. "Best water I've had in miles," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Thank you." Faith took the dipper back, their fingers brushing briefly. She filled it for herself, suddenly aware of her thirst. The water tasted of minerals and earth, familiar and grounding. "Your family built this place?" Adam asked, looking around at the small homestead. Faith nodded. "My father was a carpenter." He built the house himself when we came from Missouri 3 years ago. He had plans to expand it eventually. She swallowed hard. Never got the chance. Adam's gaze settled on the overgrown garden. Those tomato plants could use some staking. Faith followed his gaze. I know. I haven't had the heart to tend to it. My mother's garden. Her voice trailed off. Without another word, Adam walked over to the garden plot and knelt beside the sprawling tomato vines. Got any stakes? I could help you set these right before I head back. Faith started to refuse, but something stopped her. Perhaps it was the simple kindness of the offer, or maybe just the thought of having another human presence, however briefly, in this place that had become so lonely. There are some in the shed, she said. I'll get them. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Faith found herself working alongside Adam in the garden. He showed her how to properly stake the tomatoes and helped her clear the weeds that had overtaken the rows of beans and peppers. His hands moved with surprising gentleness for a man who broke horses for a living. My ma had a garden back in Pennsylvania, he explained as they worked. She taught me which plants needed what. Said a man should know how to grow his food as well as hunt it. Your mother sounds wise, Faith said, brushing dirt from her hands. She was. Adam's use of the past tense wasn't lost on Faith. Lost her in '67 to pneumonia. I'm sorry. Adam nodded his acknowledgement. Seems we've both had our share of loss. They continued working until the garden was in reasonable order. Faith felt a strange sense of accomplishment looking at the neat rows, the first positive feeling she'd experienced in weeks. It was a small thing, but it was something. Thank you, she said softly. I've been avoiding this. It felt too much like accepting they were gone. Adam straightened, stretching his back. Sometimes taking care of what they loved is the best way to honor them. Faith considered his words. She'd been so consumed by grief that she'd neglected everything her parents had built. The house, the garden, even her own future. Would you like to stay for supper? The invitation surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise Adam. It's nothing fancy, just some beans and cornbread. But it's the least I can offer after your help. Adam hesitated, glancing at the darkening sky. That's mighty kind, but I wouldn't want to impose or cause talk in town. There'll be talk regardless, Faith said with a hint of bitterness. And honestly, I don't think I can face another meal alone with 3 empty chairs staring back at me. Something in Adam's expression softened. In that case, I'd be honored to join you. Faith led him into the house, suddenly self-conscious of the dust gathering on the furniture and the unwashed dishes in the basin. She'd let things slide these past weeks, barely doing what was necessary to keep herself going. Make yourself comfortable, she said, gesturing to the small table while she busied herself at the stove, rekindling the fire that had gone out hours ago. Adam removed his hat and gun belt, setting them respectfully by the door before sitting at the table. He didn't comment on the state of the house, for which Faith was grateful. Can I help with anything? He asked instead. No, thank you. This won't take long. As Faith prepared the simple meal, she became aware of how odd the situation was. Here she was, a young widow, for that's how the town saw her, though she'd never married, cooking supper for a man she'd met only hours before. Her mother would have been scandalized. Her father would have met Adam at the door with his shotgun in hand. Yet somehow it felt right. There was something solid and trustworthy about Adam Lawson, despite his wandering ways. They ate by lamplight, the simple fare tasting better than anything Faith had managed alone. Adam ate appreciatively, complimenting her cooking with sincerity. Been a while since I had a home-cooked meal, he said. Trail food gets mighty tiresome. How long have you been delivering horses? Faith asked, curious about his life. About 5 years now. Started working with a horse trader in Denver, who needed someone who could handle the wild ones. Adam broke off a piece of cornbread. I have a way with the difficult cases, the ones other men give up on. Is it dangerous? Adam smiled slightly. Can be. Got this from a stallion that objected to being saddle broke. He gestured to the scar above his eye. But I've never met a horse that can't be gentled with enough patience. And before the horses? Fought in the war. Union side. His expression darkened slightly. Came back to find my pa had died and the family farm was gone. Drifted west after that. Faith nodded, understanding loss all too well. My father wanted to move west after the war. Said there were too many ghosts in Missouri. We finally saved enough to make the journey 3 years ago. And now? Adam asked gently. What will you do? The question caught Faith off guard. She hadn't thought beyond surviving each day. I don't know, she admitted. I was teaching at the school before. She swallowed. I suppose I could go back to that. The house is paid for. I can manage. Adam studied her across the table. It's hard being alone. Yes, Faith whispered. It is. After supper, they sat on the porch as night descended, bringing with it a cooler breeze and a sky full of stars. Crickets chirped in the tall grass, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. I should head back to town, Adam said eventually. Got an early start tomorrow. Faith felt a pang of disappointment. His company had been a welcome respite from her solitude. When will you leave Willow Creek? Day after tomorrow, most likely. Need to rest the horses before the final leg to the outpost. Faith nodded, trying not to show her disappointment. Well, thank you for your help today, and for the company. Adam stood, settling his hat back on his head. Thank you for the meal. He hesitated, then added, would you mind if I stopped by tomorrow? Could help with some repairs I noticed on your roof. Shouldn't take long to fix. Faith knew she should refuse. A woman in her position shouldn't encourage such attention. But the thought of seeing him again made her heart lighten in a way she hadn't experienced since before the fever took her family. I'd like that, she said softly. Adam smiled, tipping his hat to her. Till tomorrow, then. Faith watched him walk down the path until his figure disappeared into the darkness. For the first time in weeks, she entered her empty house without dread weighing her down. That night, she slept without dreams. True to his word, Adam returned the next morning, leading a horse laden with supplies from the general store. Faith had risen early, washing her hair and putting on a clean dress, simple actions she had neglected in her grief. Good morning, he called, tying his horse to the fence post. Thought we might need these. He unpacked several wooden shingles, nails, and a small bag of coffee, a luxury Faith hadn't been able to afford recently. You didn't have to bring coffee, she said, touched by the gesture. Adam shrugged. Figured you might be running low, and a man works better with good coffee in him. They shared a pot of the strong brew on the porch before Adam set to work on the roof. Faith watched as he moved confidently across the sloped surface, replacing damaged shingles and sealing leaks she hadn't even known existed. As he worked, Faith found herself drawn back to the garden. She pulled weeds and watered the newly staked plants, finding a rhythm in the familiar tasks her mother had taught her. The soil felt cool and alive beneath her fingers, a connection to something growing and hopeful. By midday, Adam had completed the roof repairs and moved on to fixing the sagging front porch steps. Faith brought him water and watched as he worked, his capable hands making quick work of the rotten boards. You're good at this, she observed. Picked up a few things here and there, he replied. When you travel as much as I do, you learn to be handy or go without. Have you ever wanted to settle somewhere? Faith asked, passing him a nail from the small pile between them. Adam considered the question as he hammered. Used to think I was better off moving. Less chance of disappointment that way. He glanced at her. Been reconsidering lately? Something in his tone made Faith's cheeks warm, and she looked away, focusing on the distant hills. They worked throughout the day, stopping only for a simple lunch of bread and cheese. As the sun began to set, Faith surveyed all they had accomplished. The garden was tended, the roof repaired, the porch steps sturdy again. Small changes, but significant ones. "I don't know how to thank you," she said as they sat on the newly repaired steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "No need," Adam replied. "It's been a good day's work." "Will you stay for supper again?" Faith asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Adam smiled. "I'd like that." This time they cooked together. Adam proved surprisingly adept in the kitchen, showing Faith how to make a savory stew with the few ingredients she had on hand. The domesticity of it struck Faith how natural it felt to move around her small kitchen with him, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they worked side by side. Over supper, Adam told her stories of his travels of magnificent mountain ranges in Colorado, vast plains in Kansas, and the strange beauty of the desert territories. Faith found herself laughing for the first time in months at his tale of trying to outrun an angry mother bear after accidentally coming too close to her cubs. "I've never been beyond Missouri and Texas," she admitted. "Always wanted to see more of the country." "Maybe you will someday," Adam said. "World's a big place." "Not for a woman alone," Faith replied, the reality of her situation dampening her mood. "Women don't get to wander like men do." Adam was quiet for a moment. "No, I suppose they don't. Not safely, anyway." After they washed the dishes together, Adam reluctantly said he needed to return to town to prepare for his departure the next day. "What time do you leave?" Faith asked, walking him to the gate. "Around noon. Need to reach the next watering hole by nightfall." Faith nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Will you come back through Willow Creek on your return journey?" Adam studied her face in the fading light. "Would you want me to?" "Yes," Faith answered honestly. "I would." Something shifted in Adam's expression, a softening, a decision being made. "Then I will." He hesitated, then reached out slowly to brush a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was gentle, almost reverent. Faith felt her breath catch. "Good night, Faith Zimmerman," he said softly. "Good night, Adam Lawson." She watched him walk away for the second night, a strange mixture of hope and sadness swirling in her chest. The next morning, Faith rose early and made a decision. She bathed, put on her best dress, a simple blue cotton that her mother had always said brought out her eyes, and walked to town. She told herself she was going to purchase supplies at the general store, which was true, but her heart knew the real reason. Willow Creek was beginning to stir as she arrived. The blacksmith's forge was already glowing, and Mrs. Thompson was arranging fresh bread in the window of her small bakery. Faith nodded greetings as she made her way to the livery stable at the edge of town. She found Adam there, checking the tack on a string of horses, beautiful animals with gleaming coats and alert eyes. He looked up as she approached, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. "Faith," he said, setting down the saddle he was adjusting. "Good morning." "Good morning," she replied, suddenly feeling foolish. What was she doing here? I wanted to wish you safe travels." Adam's smile softened. "That's kind of you." An awkward silence fell between them as Faith struggled to find the right words. How could she express what these 2 days had meant to her? How this stranger had somehow pulled her back from the edge of despair with simple kindness and practical help. "I brought you something," she said finally, reaching into her basket. She pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "For the trail. Just some cornbread and dried apple slices." Adam took the bundle, his fingers brushing hers. "Thank you. That's thoughtful." Another silence, heavier this time. When do you think you'll be passing through again? Faith asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Hard to say. The army might have more work for me. Adam adjusted his hat. But I reckon I could be back through within a month or so. Faith nodded, fighting disappointment. A month seemed an eternity. Your garden should be producing well by then, Adam continued. Those tomatoes looked promising. Yes, Faith agreed. Thanks to your help. Adam stepped closer, lowering his voice though no one was nearby. Faith, He paused, seeming to search for words. I've enjoyed these past days. More than I expected to. So have I, she admitted. Adam took a deep breath. I'm not good with words or promises. My life isn't settled enough to offer either. But I want you to know I'll be thinking about you on the trail. Faith felt warmth spread through her chest. And I'll be thinking of you. He reached out slowly and took her hand, his calloused thumb running gently over her knuckles. The touch was brief but charged with meaning. I should finish getting these horses ready, he said reluctantly. Of course. Faith withdrew her hand. Safe travels, Adam. She turned to leave, fighting the urge to look back. Faith, Adam called when she'd gone a few paces. She turned to find him watching her intently. Faith comes back slow, remember? Give it time. She knew he wasn't just talking about her relationship with God. I will, she promised. The following weeks passed with an odd mixture of emptiness and purpose. Faith returned to teaching at the small schoolhouse, finding comfort in the routine and the children's uncomplicated joy. She tended her garden diligently, watching with satisfaction as the plants flourished under her care. Each vegetable she harvested felt like a small victory, a connection to her mother's legacy. On Sundays, she returned to church, though she often sat in the back row. She still couldn't bring herself to open her Bible, but she listened to Pastor Miller's sermons with less resistance than before. The community embraced her return, though Faith maintained a polite distance, not yet ready to accept invitations to Sunday dinners or quilting circles. At night, she would sit on her porch and look at the stars, wondering if Adam was looking at the same constellations wherever he was. She tried not to count the days, but her mind kept track anyway. 2 weeks. 3. 25 days. On the 28th day, a fierce storm swept through Willow Creek. Rain pounded the roof, no longer leaking thanks to Adam's repairs, and lightning split the sky. Faith sat by her window, watching nature's fury with a cup of tea warming her hands. A sudden pounding on her door startled her. Who would be out in such weather? Cautiously, she approached the door. Who's there? Faith? It's Adam. Her heart lurched as she quickly unbolted the door. Adam stood on her porch, drenched to the skin, water streaming from his hat and coat. Adam, what are you doing here in this storm? She stepped back to let him enter. He removed his hat, water pooling at his feet. Got caught in it about 5 miles back. Thought I could outride it, but... He gestured to his soaked condition. You'll catch your death, Faith scolded. Even as joy bubbled inside her. Take off that wet coat. I'll stoke the fire. Adam obeyed, hanging his dripping coat and hat by the door. His shirt clung to him, equally soaked. Faith busied herself with the fire, trying not to notice the way the wet fabric outlined his broad shoulders. You're back earlier than you expected, she said, adding wood to the flames. Army had fewer horses than anticipated, and He hesitated. I was eager to be on the return journey. Faith felt warmth that had nothing to do with the growing fire. She fetched a blanket from the chest in the corner and handed it to him. Wrap this around you. I'll make some hot coffee. As she busied herself in the kitchen, Faith was acutely aware of Adam's presence, of the way he filled the small house with his energy. She heard him moving about, the floorboards creaking under his weight. Your garden's looking fine, he commented. Saw it when I rode up. It's doing well, Faith replied, bringing 2 steaming cups to the table. I've had more tomatoes than I know what to do with. Been trading them with Mrs. Thompson for bread. Adam accepted the cup gratefully, his fingers brushing hers in the exchange. How have you been, Faith? The simple question carried weight. Faith sat across from him, cradling her own cup. Better, she answered honestly. Not good, not yet, but better. Adam nodded, understanding in his eyes. And the teaching? The children help. They don't treat me like I might shatter. Faith sipped her coffee. What about you? How was your journey? Adam told her about the cavalry outpost, the officers he dealt with, and the return trip through territory where tensions with native tribes were increasing. He spoke of beautiful vistas and dangerous river crossings, painting pictures with his words that made Faith feel as though she'd traveled alongside him. The storm continued to rage outside, rain lashing against the windows and thunder rumbling overhead. You can't travel in this, Faith said when there was a lull in conversation. You should stay until it passes. Adam looked toward the window, then back at Faith. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of propriety versus necessity. I can sleep in the barn, he offered. Faith shook her head. The roof leaks. You'd be as wet as you are now. She gathered her courage. You can take my parents' room. The bed's made up. Adam studied her face. Are you sure? Yes, Faith said, surprising herself with her certainty. It's what they would have offered to any traveler caught in such weather. Later, after showing Adam to the room that had remained closed since her parents' passing, Faith lay in her own bed listening to the storm and the occasional creak of floorboards as Adam moved in the next room. His presence in the house should have felt intrusive or improper, but instead, it brought a sense of rightness, of completion. Morning brought clear skies and birdsong. Faith woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of movement in her kitchen. She dressed quickly, plaiting her hair with more care than usual. Adam stood at her stove, frying eggs in her cast-iron pan. He'd found bacon somewhere, certainly not from her sparse larder, and the savory smell made her stomach growl. Good morning, he said, glancing over his shoulder. Hope you don't mind. Thought I'd make breakfast to thank you for the shelter. Not at all, Faith replied, moved by the domestic scene before her. They ate together at the small table, sunlight streaming through the windows and casting golden patterns on the worn wood. I need to head into town, Adam said as they washed the dishes together. Get supplies before continuing on. Faith nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Of course. Adam dried his hands on a towel, then turned to face her fully. Faith, there's something I need to say. Her heart quickened at his serious tone. Yes. These past weeks on the trail, I've had a lot of time to think. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as nervousness. I've been wandering a long time, never felt the need to put down roots anywhere. Faith waited, hardly daring to breathe. But I find myself thinking about Willow Creek, about this house, about you. His eyes, honest and direct, held hers. I know it hasn't been long. I know you're still grieving, but I wonder if I came back again, not just passing through, if there might be a place for me here. Faith felt tears welling in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. Are you asking to court me, Adam Lawson? A smile crept across his face. I reckon I am, though I'm making a poor job of it. Faith took a step toward him. I would like that. Very much. Adam's smile broadened. He reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she wanted, and gently took her hands in his. I need to finish this job, he said. Got horses to deliver in San Antonio, but then I'd like to come back. Properly. Maybe see about work at one of the ranches around here. How long will you be gone? Faith asked. 3 weeks. Maybe 4. Faith nodded. It seemed a lifetime, but it was a finite separation with promise at the end. I'll be here. Adam squeezed her hands gently. I know it's fast. People might talk. People always talk, Faith replied. Especially in Willow Creek. He chuckled, the sound warming her. True enough. Before he left that morning, Adam helped Faith harvest ripe vegetables from her garden. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, occasionally brushing hands or exchanging glances that spoke volumes. At the gate, Adam hesitated. Faith, before I go, would you do something for me? What is that? Would you open that Bible of yours? Not for me, but for yourself. Faith felt a resistance rise within her. Adam, I'm not saying you need to believe everything in it right now, he said gently. Just don't keep it closed forever. Faith comes back slow, remember? But it doesn't come back at all if you don't give it a chance. Faith looked into his earnest face and found herself nodding. I'll try. Adam's smile was worth the promise. He reached out and brushed his fingers against her cheek, a touch so light she might have imagined it. Until I return, he said softly. Faith watched him ride away, a strange mixture of hope and anticipation replacing the emptiness that had been her constant companion for so long. That evening, she took her Bible from its place on the shelf where it had sat untouched for weeks. She ran her fingers over the embossed leather, tracing the gilt letters of her name that her father had paid extra to have added. Slowly, she opened it, letting the pages fall where they would. Her eyes landed on a passage from Isaiah. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Faith read the words aloud, letting them settle in the quiet house. They didn't immediately heal her heart or restore her faith, but they were a beginning. A crack in the wall she'd built around her grief. She closed the Bible but didn't return it to the shelf. Instead, she placed it on her bedside table where she would see it in the morning. The weeks of Adam's absence passed more quickly than Faith had anticipated. She threw herself into teaching, expanded her garden, and began attending the women's prayer group at church, not fully participating but listening with an open mind. Each day, she read a small passage from her Bible, not seeking immediate answers but allowing the familiar words to wash over her. Word spread through Willow Creek that Adam Lawson had intentions toward Faith Zimmerman. Some disapproved of the hasty courtship, particularly given Faith's recent losses. Others, including Pastor Miller, saw the positive change in Faith and welcomed it. "You've got color in your cheeks again," Mrs. Thompson remarked one day as Faith purchased flour at the general store. "That cowboy of yours is good medicine." Faith blushed but didn't contradict the older woman's assumption. In her heart, Adam was indeed her cowboy, though she scarcely dared admit it even to herself. For weeks stretched into 5, and Faith tried not to worry. The trails were unpredictable, delays common. Still, each day without Adam's return caused a small knot of anxiety to tighten in her chest. On a warm Wednesday afternoon, as Faith dismissed her students for the day, a commotion drew her attention to the street outside. A group of riders was passing through town, trail-worn and dusty. Her heart leaped when she recognized Adam among them, riding tall despite obvious fatigue. Their eyes met across the distance. Adam's face broke into a smile that made Faith's heart stutter. He said something to his companions and broke away, guiding his horse toward the schoolhouse. Faith was vaguely aware of the children whispering and giggling around her, but she couldn't tear her gaze from Adam as he dismounted and approached. "Miss Zimmerman," he said formally, tipping his hat. His eyes, however, were anything but formal, filled with warmth and something deeper that made Faith's cheeks flush. "Mr. Lawson," she replied, equally formal though her voice trembled slightly. "Welcome back to Willow Creek." Adam glanced at the curious children watching them with undisguised interest. "Mind if I walk you home, madam?" Faith smiled, gathering her books. "I'd be honored." They walked slowly through town, maintaining a respectable distance while acutely aware of the eyes following them. Only when they reached the outskirts did Adam speak freely. "I missed you," he said simply. "Thought about you every day." "I missed you too," Faith admitted. "Was beginning to worry when you didn't return when expected." Adam's expression darkened slightly. "Had some trouble near the border. Raiders hit a settlement not far from where we were camped. Stayed to help rebuild before continuing on." Faith's heart swelled with pride at his instinctive kindness. "I'm glad you're safe." They reached her house, its appearance markedly improved since Adam's first visit. Faith had planted flowers along the walkway, repainted the front door, and hung new curtains in the windows. "You've been busy," Adam remarked, taking in the changes. "Needed something to occupy my hands and mind," Faith replied. "Would you like to come in? I could make coffee." Adam shook his head reluctantly. "Better not today. Need to see the men settled and take care of some business in town." His eyes held a promise. "But I'll call on you properly tomorrow, if I may." "I'd like that," Faith said. True to his word, Adam appeared at her door the next evening, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. He carried a small bouquet of wildflowers and a nervous expression that Faith found endearing. "These are for you," he said, offering the flowers. "Not much, but they're beautiful," Faith interrupted, accepting them with a smile. "Come in." Over a simple supper, Adam shared tales of his journey while Faith told him about the changes in Willow Creek during his absence, Mrs. Peterson's new baby, the planned expansion of the general store, the upcoming harvest festival. "I've been thinking," Adam said as they sat on the porch afterward, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "Spoke with Mr. Jenkins today about his horse breeding operation. He's looking for someone with my experience." Faith's heart quickened. "And offered me a position, good wages, a small cabin on his property." Adam turned to look at her directly. "It would mean staying in Willow Creek permanently." Faith tried to contain her joy. "Is that what you want? After all your years of wandering?" Adam reached for her hand, his touch sending warmth up her arm. "Faith Zimmerman, I've seen more of this country than most. Beautiful places that take your breath away. But nowhere has felt like coming home until I met you." Faith's eyes filled with tears. "Adam, I know it's fast," he continued. "I know you've had more than your share of loss. I'm not asking for promises yet. Just a chance to show you what we could build together." Faith looked at their joined hands, then up into Adam's honest face. In the weeks of his absence, she had examined her heart carefully. Her grief for her family remained, a part of her that would never entirely heal. But alongside it had grown something new, a tender, hopeful feeling that blossomed whenever she thought of Adam. "I'd like that chance," she said softly. "Very much." Adam's smile was radiant in the fading light. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he leaned forward. Faith met him halfway, their lips touching in a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened into something more certain. When they finally parted, Faith rested her forehead against his. "People will say it's too soon." "Let them talk," Adam murmured. "Some things are worth a little gossip." The following months passed in a blur of happiness for Faith. Adam settled into his position at the Jenkins Ranch, proving his worth with the horses and earning the respect of the community. He called on Faith properly several evenings a week, sometimes bringing small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, honey from a local beekeeper, a book of poetry he'd found in the general store. They attended church together on Sundays, Adam sitting beside Faith as she gradually rediscovered her relationship with God. It wasn't the same blind faith she'd had before her family's death, but something more mature, of faith that acknowledged pain and doubt while still reaching for hope. By the time autumn painted the surrounding hills in golds and reds, Faith had fallen deeply in love with Adam Lawson. She loved his quiet strength, his gentle hands, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. She loved how he listened when she spoke of her family, never trying to diminish her grief but helping her carry it. On a crisp October evening, Adam took Faith for a ride to a hilltop overlooking Willow Creek. The setting sun bathed the landscape in amber light as they spread a blanket and shared a simple picnic. "I have something to show you," Adam said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a folded paper and handed it to Faith. She opened it to find a simple drawing, a sketch of a house, larger than her current one but with similar features. "What's this?" she asked. Adam pointed to various features of the drawing. "2 bedrooms here, proper kitchen here, front porch wrapping around." He looked at her, a mixture of hope and vulnerability in his eyes. "I've been saving my wages. Mr. Jenkins has offered me a piece of land at the edge of his property if I stay on permanently." Faith's heart raced as she began to understand. "Adam," he took her hands in his. "Faith Zimmerman, I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, but I've lived enough to recognize what matters." He swallowed hard. "I love you. I want to build this house with you, for you. I want to plant gardens and raise horses and maybe someday children, if you'll have me." Tears filled Faith's eyes as Adam reached into his pocket again and withdrew a simple gold ring. "It's not fancy," he said apologetically, "but it's honest, like what I feel for you. Ask me," Faith whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Adam smiled, holding the ring between them. "Faith Zimmerman, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Faith said without hesitation. "Yes, Adam Lawson, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, where it nestled beside her mother's band. Then he kissed her, a kiss full of promise and future. As they rode back to town in the gathering dusk, Faith's heart felt fuller than she could have imagined possible 6 months ago when she sat on those church steps with her Bible closed. "Adam," she said as they approached her house, "do you remember what you said to me that first day?" He glanced at her questioningly. "You said faith comes back slow, like a skittish horse after it's been spooked." Faith squeezed his hand. "You were right, about faith in God and about faith in love. Both came back to me slowly, because of you." Adam's eyes softened. Sometimes the things that come slow are the ones that stay longest. They were married on a bright spring day, almost a year after their first meeting. The small church in Willow Creek was filled with well-wishers. The entire town had turned out to see the schoolteacher wed her cowboy. Faith wore a simple white dress with her mother's lace collar. In her hands, she carried her Bible, now well-thumbed and marked with passages that had sustained her through grief and guided her toward joy. Pastor Miller beamed as he pronounced them husband and wife. When Adam kissed his bride, cheers erupted throughout the church. Faith looked into her husband's eyes and saw her future reflected there, a future built on love that had come slowly but surely, like faith itself. Their new home was completed by summer, standing proud on a gentle rise with views of the distant hills. Adam had built it with his own hands, with help from neighbors who had come to respect the former drifter who'd found his place among them. Faith planted a garden twice the size of her old one, with flowers intermingled among the vegetables just as her mother had always done. On warm evenings, they would sit on their wraparound porch, watching the sunset and talking of their days. Adam's work with horses prospered, his gentle methods gaining recognition beyond Willow Creek. Faith continued teaching, her classroom growing as the town expanded. When their first child, a daughter they named Hope, arrived the following winter, their joy was complete. Adam held the infant with hands that had broken wild horses and built their home, now impossibly gentle as they cradled new life. "She has your eyes?" Faith whispered as they sat beside the fire, watching their daughter sleep. "And your strength?" Adam replied, kissing Faith's temple. As hope grew, she was joined by a brother they named Samuel, after Faith's father. The children thrived in the house filled with love and laughter, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk under their father's watchful instruction. Years passed, the seasons turning in their eternal cycle. Willow Creek grew from a small settlement to a proper town with a new schoolhouse where Faith served as headmistress. Adam's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout the territory, bringing clients from as far as Kansas and Colorado. On Sunday mornings, the Lawson family occupied the same pew in church, Faith's Bible open in her hands. Sometimes, when the light slanted just right through the stained glass windows, she would glance at the church steps where she had once sat in despair, and marvel at the journey that had brought her from that moment to this one. On their 10th anniversary, Adam took Faith back to the hilltop where he had proposed. They spread a blanket under the same oak tree, now a decade older and broader. "Regrets?" Adam asked, his arm around his wife as they watched the sun set. Faith leaned against his shoulder, thinking of the path that had brought them here, the grief that had nearly consumed her, the chance meeting that had saved her, the slow rebuilding of faith in all its forms. "Not one," she answered truthfully. "Every step led me to you." Adam's arm tightened around her. "Even the painful ones?" Faith nodded. "Even those." She turned to look into the face she had loved for a decade, now bearing lines of experience and wisdom alongside the familiar crinkles of laughter. "Faith comes back slow, remember? But it does come back." Adam smiled, the same smile that had first warmed her heart on those church steps so many years ago, and stays for good when it does. As they rode home in the gathering twilight to their children and the life they had built together, Faith felt the completeness of her journey. From the depths of despair to the heights of joy, from closed Bible to open heart, from loneliness to love, Faith had indeed come back, slow but sure, like the steady rhythm of a horse's hooves carrying her home.